Hello, internet. Am I green on the background? Because I left myself as green.
Yeah, you're
Because I
green. I don't
forgot that's
have a
not how our
thing on
setup
this
is.
one. Yeah, sorry.
Hold on. Hi, everybody. This is Angela. I am one of two hosts here for the Nerdsmith Power Hour. Hi, Anne. Please pardon the mess. Trying to get full green.
And
There we go. And we are in a library now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nerdsmith Power Hour. I am Angela. This is Logan. We are directors of Nerdsmith and all-around gooftastic people. We like shooting the shit on Wednesday afternoons during your lunch break to talk about all sorts of stuff. RPGs, so TTRPGs, role-playing games. Those are the same thing. And
we can be
things
talking about role-playing video games. We've talked about video games
true.
before.
We talk about all sorts of stuff, and also sort of giving a insight into how the Nerdsmith network works and what's on the horizon for us, and all sorts of fun stuff. So we're very happy to have you with us. We are going to be chatting about a couple of things. I have at least one thing on the agenda that I thought would be fun to kind of see how the sausage gets made.
I'm sure we will talk about the Nerdsmith or the Shenanigans recap from yesterday, at least some of the fun stuff.
A little bit,
because that was a subscriber-only event, so we don't want to talk too much about it.
But, so, just a really quick recap of that. We had a special one-shot that we ran yesterday. It was exclusively for our Twitch subscribers, and you're amazing. Thank you so much for showing us a good example of how to run that kind of event, because it worked out really well.
Anne's not the only one in the audience,
awesome.
so we should point out who we're talking to.
I said thank you, Anne.
I
might
missed
have
that.
blurred the word a little too much. That's okay. So we ran a one shot where we were playing goblins in space camp, and you
not
run
exactly, but yeah.
And you ran subscriber-only events at the beginning of Banana Brothers when you guys were doing tech, and we're doing the same thing with Shenanigans. Yeah. We're going to run some sort of test games to acclimate to each other as a group, since Ren is new to our ensemble, so we're just trying to all kind of get into a nice working relationship, role-playing relationship with everyone.
Plus, it lets me tease a little bit of the aspects of the game and kind of what we're going to be dealing with, and it also makes sure that we don't skip any Tuesdays between now and our thing, so we don't get rusty.
You like getting rusty, though. You play Rust.
I do play Rust. Yes, that's true. They played goblins who were interns at the Nexus Exploration and Research Organization, or NERO. I made a little logo we posted, and they had to basically...
I'm sure that has no implications at all, calling it Nero.
No, not at all. I was actually... originally didn't. I was just looking for a 4-letter acronym, and then when I realized what it was, I was like, oh, I'm very happy with that. I had to look up Nero just to make sure it was who I was thinking of, and it was. Thank you to Buffy the Vampire Slayer for reminding me about that one. Don't ask. I'm weird. My brain goes to a lot of different weird places. So they were interns in research and development, so they had to test out all of the new devices, like the teleporty, which was written down as telepotty. They had to test out the Illusiosphere, which is a fantasy holodeck, and you had to test out the wild space actuating rotational pulleys, which were basically giant hamster wheels.
My character had a lot of issues with the phrase rotational pulley. You went and boss doesn't listen to your nonsense. I was like, but physics. Pulleys don't rotate.
Well, technically a pulley has a rotational aspect to it.
Sure. My character also thought you could melt from being too intelligent, so I'm not going to assume she knew a ton of things. She was not. Yeah. I've actually been going back and watching a couple clips since last night because I had such a good time. So what we're going to be doing with that one shot, as we said, it was Twitch subscribers only to watch the live event, but we are saving the video to be putting up in our Patreon as bonus content for our Patreon subscribers.
Yes.
So you can check it out on basically VOD coming soon. So you can check that out. I said this at the end of last night. I walked in going, I better not fall in love with these characters. And I did. I was terrible. I was okay, Anne. I was an artificer. My intelligence was pretty solid. I also, by the end, had a diploma. So...
Well, you did for a few minutes anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, we had a lot of cool stuff. Logan, as he said, previewed a couple of things about maybe the world building or the location we're going to spend some of a great deal of our time in. In our Spelljammer campaign, there was some technology introduced that I DM'd him, and I was very excited by certain things being introduced into the game. And yeah, so I was very excited. It went off beautifully. Everybody did great. I really loved
it. Was a good game. Yeah,
energy.
It was a very good game. So if you get a chance, you should check it out on our Patreon when we post that. It'll go up live next month, I believe.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a lovely time. But so here's the thing I wanted to talk about today. I figured I just wanted to. This would be an easy way to hold attention and focus on this particular question, because Logan and I had been talking a little bit about this. So I wanted to take, in the future of leveling up our characters in Shenanigans Season 2, I wanted to take a particular feat. It blended well with the kind of character I wanted, and Logan and I talked about it for a little while, and we decided we want to modify it. Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. I wanted to take the Observant feat.
So what does the Observant feat do? Let's start there.
All right, so the Observant feat does 3 things.
As most feats do.
1, gives you a +1 to your Wisdom score, up to 20. It gives you a +5 on your Passive Perception and Passive Investigation scores.
Correct.
And it also gives you a
superpower,
a flavor skill, that you can read lips. When you can see someone's mouth and they are speaking and you can see them clearly, you can read their lips as long as you understand the language they're speaking. Right. So we would you like to talk a little bit about that? Why we are going to be modifying it a little bit, Logan? Or you just want to talk about the actual modification?
No, we can talk about why we're modifying it. So for me, I've always had a problem with this feat. Why? I have a little bit of a personal aspect to it. I'm partially deaf in my left ear. I have a hard time hearing certain volumes and frequencies, and I also have a hard time determining what people are saying. So if somebody's walking with me on my left side and they're talking to me, my wife and child understand I'll say wrong side, and then we just kind of switch sides. They talk to me on this side because I can't understand anything they're saying. I've often thought about what would happen if I did go fully deaf in that ear, fully deaf in both ears. It's part of why I really want to learn sign language. It's part of why I really want to learn. I used to want to learn how to read lips, and so I started learning and reading and trying about 20 years ago, and found out that it is not actually really easily possible. It is a very, very difficult skill that is well beyond even people who have to live without hearing. For the most part, because people will mumble, or people will cover their mouths, or lots of different reasons. They have accents. So it's pretty much near impossible to actually learn how to read people's lips. So I've always not liked this feat because, and this is a horrible excuse, it's not realistic, but it's a fantasy game. So that's why it's not a good excuse, because we have dragons and magic.
But it's a particular aspect of a real world concern,
right? Well, that's where
that kind of sets a bad feeling.
That's where my new the new idea, these new ideas, these new understandings I have over the past couple of years, the idea of it being it's actually a little ableist. The idea that it's just you can just take this feat and you magically fix this issue. So as long as you see their lips and speaking language, there's none of these other problems. We just get to blow past them. Nobody has to deal with them because you're just that good, when nobody really could be that good. And it's not even based in magic. It's just a skill that you can develop. So I've never really liked it, and I didn't know why, but now I've kind of come to understand that it kind of hits home a little bit. It's a personal connection, but also it's a little ableist. So we've decided that aspect of this feat is not something that we're going to be using. I also, it just always seemed weird to me that, it says as long as you can see their lips, but you can see people's lips from, 100 feet away. It just still doesn't seem to me that you should be able to.
Yeah. The best example that I have is there's a YouTuber who I follow, and she talks about being deaf, and the fact that she went deaf at a fairly older age. She went deaf at like 15, I think, and in addition to other medical concerns that she has. And her partner, they film together side by side. They do vlogs together, and she's talked about needing to like watch her wife saying like, I need to see your lips, but it's not about like, oh, all of a sudden I can understand. She's described her hearing loss as being like, there's a party going on the other side of a wall and it's just muffled, but if you can see, it gives her added context that lets her piece together what's being said.
Yeah.
It's not all of a sudden I know exactly what's there, but it is helping to bolster her comprehension of what's going on when she's talking to someone. So that's how I've understood it. So I can understand the slight squigginess of suddenly being able to just innately read lips.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I did a little bit of research. I realized I had a couple of really kick-ass homebrew documents that talk about feats and different custom feats that someone's made. I have Wardrow's Feat Compendium, which has a bunch of shit in it. I have the Unearthed Arcana racial ability feat thing, just to see what kind of stuff they were doing. And then there was another one that was some custom, I think by the same person who put together the Wardrow's feat compendium. So I found a couple of options that I wanted to talk to Logan about, and I figured I'd talk with you guys here too, so that maybe you guys can chime in and chat if you have any thoughts about some options. I think I've constructed what I think would be a good replacement plan, but I don't want to ignore the other ones in case Logan wants to hear all the options. So a couple of things that I found. One of them it hadn't even occurred to me. The simplest option to just modify the observant feat. I would like to keep the +1 to my wisdom. I think
sure.
That's
well, again, I have no problems with the other two aspects of it.
Right. So specifically the +5 on those passives. I wanted to discuss potentially swapping out one of the skills. Instead of passive investigation, I'd want passive insight. Just as this idea that her observant nature comes less from the world around and more her picking up on things about. I don't know whether or not you would interpret being perceptive about a person, the way they carry themselves, the looks that they have. You're insightful into the idea of how this person is behaving versus the physical world around.
I would say person. Personally, if we were going to do this, I would just recreate the feat, basically keep it very similar, but I would just change the name of it to insightful. So instead of seeing the world around you and the details, what you're seeing is you're seeing and feeling the people.
Okay. The simplest version is a +1 of wisdom and then advantage on perception and insight checks. What that does is, and because I had forgotten about this, what that does is I would get advantage on perception and insight checks, but it also gives you a +5 on your passive perception and insight. I had forgotten that to have a blanket advantage in the book gives you a +5 to your passives.
Correct.
So basically the original observant was just not giving you advantage and giving you the passive bonuses. So instead of having a special skill underneath that's like a flavor skill, don't worry about it, just get advantage on perception and insight. That's all I was going to propose.
So the problem with that is that can be taken away. The +5s can't.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
So if you were in a situation where you got disadvantage, you would lose those bonuses from that feat. Whereas of right now, you wouldn't. the way they're worded.
That's true. That is fair.
That would be the only reason I would say we'd want to keep it similar to the way it is. I don't mind at all swapping out one feat for another. That's not a problem. Or one skill for another inside of a feat. That actually is not an issue for me at all. Okay. So, and I still think it's a little underpowered if we don't do something else as well.
So there's some other things here. One that I found was really interesting. It was I think it was in a thing called Perceptive. You do not get disadvantage in lightly obscured situations as long as you can see and hear in those situations. The idea of dark vision technically is low light, so that could affect your ability to perceive certain things. It could make the DC higher, it could make something slightly more complicated, but with that option,
it does, it's built in.
Right. So with that, it basically it removes disadvantage, but it could also preserve advantage that I might have in something. So that was one that I thought as a swap out for lip reading, but it felt like it could potentially be a little overpowered.
Well, I'm also already realizing that so even if we leave it the way it is, you still lose it when there's disadvantage, because disadvantage gives you -5 to passive checks. But what wording it the way that you would have said, giving advantage, that would have prevented you from getting advantage on top of it. Right now, if you get advantage, so if you have +5 because of the insightful feat to your insight, passive insight, and you gain advantage, you then would have another +5. So you'd actually have +10. So you'd have an insane, probably minimum 15 to 20 insight base or passive.
One of the things that I wanted to keep in mind in context in this conversation, at least for the audience, this was something that Logan and I just talked about recently that for some reason had completely whooshed over my head. The fact, or you just said Jeremy Crawford had recently kind of adjudicated passive
I have no idea if it was recent or not, but I did just see that Jeremy Crawford put out that rules as intended, and he believes rules as written say that your skill can never be below your passive. So if you roll
suddenly makes that
a perception
so much
check,
more powerful than I thought.
Yeah, so if you roll a perception check and you roll a 3, but your passive is a 10, you get the 10.
Right.
And for me,
the idea of if you're casually looking around and you notice something better than you would if you were actively looking, Andy suggested the only addendum to that would be you can critically fail, but other than a critical failure,
you can't critically fail
you can't get lower than your passive.
You can't critically fail on skill checks, as rules as written.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can only critically fail. The only thing you can critically fail is succeed on are attack rolls in D&D as written. Now, I agree with you.
Would like?
No, what I would probably do is I would probably put some sort of penalty on, like if you roll a 1, that would be the only time you can be below your passive, and whatever you get, you get. That might be something I would do.
It's that there are extenuating circumstances that are keeping you from even noticing.
Which fixes what I was just about to bring up. See, for me, when you are standing back and you're just kind of passively looking and just kind of enjoying whatever you're doing, your brain is very actively different than if you are looking for something. If you are actively looking around the room with a perception check, usually there's a reason that you're being active, and that reason puts a bias on your brain. So you're like, I'm looking for secret doors. Well, fine. So if you're looking for secret doors, your passive check for secret doors might be a part of that. But your passive check overall might drop to 0 for anything else because you're focusing.
And that's a completely by chance situation too. The idea is that there's a 5% chance. That's what happens is you get so hyper-focused on a particular thing. Hyper-focus is specific. I didn't mean to just sort of kind of throw it out casually. But you could get so focused on the thing that you're looking for that you miss a detail. And that's a failure. You missed it. It's something happened. And one of the things I love about critical failures is you can justify them in a lot of different ways. You could have the environment be a reason. You could have your own personal mental state could be a reason. There's lots of ways to, in the story and the narrative, wave away why a fail happened.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things about the collaborative nature of the game is, okay, why did you, I'm way more interested in the why you failed than the fact of the failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It softens the blow too. It makes it feel a little less like, oh, the random number generator fucked me. It's like, no, let's talk narratively why this twist happened. And you lean into it in a role play sense.
So how I would probably end up running it would be that while you're making an active check, you can't go below your passive. However, you are only focusing on searching for what that one active thing is. Your passive, during that moment in the scene, if something else was happening, you would be distracted. Your passive wouldn't really count for other things. So like if you're dealing with one particular person and you decide you want to kind of actively focus on them, your insight is going to be focused on them. So you may not notice how some of the other people in a party might be acting at that particular moment because you're focusing. And that's kind of how I would be running with this bottom minimum. The minimum on your active checks, but it only counts in that moment. But as soon as you kind of disengage from that, then you can kind of see the other thing. The other thing is that with insight, I'm going to be reading a lot into insight because a lot of people use it as a lie detector, and it's not going to ever be that for me. I have in the past, but I'm going to try really hard not to allow that to be that. But if you're talking, I can't hear you.
I said that is something I want to explore with you. I want to see what that means, what having a high insight means.
Yeah. And
I really want to explore that.
Absolutely. And the insight, I also think, doesn't come immediately very well. You can have a gut reaction about someone, and that can be something that I think that
have plays into your wisdom a little bit.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. However, and again, pulling in realisticness again is a kind of a crunchy thing with a fantasy game. They've done hundreds and hundreds of studies of police and law enforcement and gut reactions and things like that, and they found that basically it's a crapshoot. That nobody, no matter who they are, is any good at determining the real motives or intentions behind anyone just by looking at them
in
initially,
a replicatable way.
In any replicatable, or even after talking to them for any amount of time, it becomes near impossible. That's why a lot of times character witnesses and things that they really shouldn't be given as much weight as we do give them, because it's near impossible to tell. Really, in the end, it's really, really hard to tell. So that idea is another one of those situations where it's like, I don't want to just superpower this. Yes, you guys are epic heroes, but I don't want to just give superpowers for these types of things immediately. But there's a lot of things like that I want to kind of pay attention to more and more as I get more experience with the game. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that there's examples in a lot of skills that are like that, of just here are the superpowers that we give people all the time.
Yeah. And I really want to. Okay, so back to this idea. Let's call it the insightful field.
Sure.
I'm fine with that. So the idea of getting here were some of the ideas, and we can kind of narrow them down. So we already talked advantage on perception and insight, which would give you the +5 in your passive skills. There's also possibly instead a proficiency in perception and or insight, or expertise if you already have proficiency. So that's an option. So there's a couple of different combinations in there. You could do one skill or both, but the idea of having proficiency or expertise, like whichever one you don't have, you take that.
Right.
So that's an option. I would never say no to expertise.
What is his feat currently? Observant? Is that what it's called?
Observant.
Okay.
It's a +1 to wisdom. It's the +5s to passive investigation and perception, and then the lip reading. Those are the 3 things you get from it.
That's really interesting, because that really does become a much more powerful thing, because I think the idea when the feat was created, they say, oh, it's just bonus to your passive, not to your active. But with Jeremy Crawford saying that that's the minimum, it is to your active as well. So that's going to be something that I'm going to look into more about what he said before about it. and see if he has exceptions or if there's anything. Maybe it only counts for perception. Or
Personally,
I don't
know. I just have so much, like, we always throw around passive, like, oh, my passive perception is this. It's like, if your passive perception's a 20, you could never roll less than a 20 on your. That's unless you critically fail. That I think that's. I mean, that in my opinion, that plays really nicely into the whole we're heroes and the reason we tell the story about these people is because there is something about them that is, larger than life. There's something, and I mean, a lot of these sort of fantasy games, there's something mythic about them. There's a whiff of destiny about them that has to do with their skills. And so to give people, oh, hello, Heath. How are you?
Hi, Heath.
You're a favorite person too, and I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I did that voice. It just happened. I think it's because your name's Heath, so I went, hello, Heath.
Okay. All right.
Heath will be great for this too.
I found the actual quote from Jeremy Crawford. It looks like the thing that I found the other day was somebody.
Was it apocryphal or paraphrasing?
Yeah, it wasn't exactly. So the tweet that actually came out was, if a DM decides to A, use passive checks, which is optional, and decides B, it's always active, then it can function as a skill check minimum, entirely up to the DM. I thought that was...
Wait, one more time?
So if they decide to use it, okay, if they decide to use this optional passive ability, they then have to decide if it's always on or not. Is a passive thing just
the DM
constant?
Has to decide?
Yeah. The DM has to decide if this passive ability is always on or if it's something that only applies in certain situations. If it's always on, then it could be considered that it could act as a minimum. So he did not say that it's rules as written or rules as intended. He said that
it is an option.
It is an option.
So I guess the question is, Logan, how do you feel about the idea of a passive skill literally just being, this is your baseline state?
This was also back in 2017 when passive perception was the only passive skill we had. So you think that before we started applying this passive optional rule to all other skills, any observant skill, I think it just starts to change the game a lot, because you could easily get your passive with things like the observant feat and things. You can easily get it up to 15, 16, 17, 18. If that becomes your minimum, then you start to turn into a superhero, basically. And I understand that we
name dropped Sherlock Holmes the other day.
I was going to say Sherlock Holmes is a great one for investigation, and I think part of that goes, I would have to be a very skilled DM. In that particular way, which I'm not sure that I am, to be able to kind of still make it challenging for the group.
Passive investigation feels very much like a Sherlock
I agree.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think passive insight too.
Constantly thinking about it. Okay, new proposal. What about reading passive like that as a feat?
I'm not sure that giving up a feat would be enough.
Well, as part of the rolling into the skill, the idea of I'm just rattle it off. You get advantage on a thing. Oh, yeah, Heath, sorry, context. We are talking about observant, but we're trying to fiddle with it a little bit because Logan would like to try to modify past the lip reading thing. He's got certain hangups with the idea of the
basically it's a little ableist. That's a big issue. It's a little ableist to just automatically, I can see you 100 feet away and I can read your lips and you're speaking my language, so I know exactly what you're saying. That's not a great thing.
I had forgotten until just now that there was a secondary option to keeping the lip reading, but modifying it a little bit. So I want to know what you think about this. Again, have absolutely no problem with just blanket removing it and doing something different. But so this was an idea that was, you add stipulations to the lip reading. There's some complication to it. One, you have to choose one language that you can do this in. It's not any language you know, it's you pick the language that you can do it in. And then secondly, you roll to see how you do. And if you succeed at the DC, you get a percentage of what is said. You get a few words. Like the idea was like you get like 60% of what was said if you successfully
based on the interpretation roll.
Yeah.
I am not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to. I would say that there has to be a distance limit. I would say maybe 15 feet.
It said feet. Something. It said 30, but yeah.
I don't think it said that. It just said as you can see.
No, sorry. The example that I saw was like within 30 feet.
Yeah, within a certain range. You would have to be almost within like a 90-degree arc in front of them, like in a cone in front of them, because you can't really read lips from the side. And also if they have an accent, there might be disadvantage. There's a lot of things that could come
it would
into
need
that.
To be incredibly. I don't want to make it so complicated that like we have to spend multiple minutes trying to assess whether or not I can do it. So one possibility would just be, the character has a noted trained skill in lip reading. And then, like, basically, if you're within range and you know the language, you roll a percentile die, and that's about how much information you get.
It says specifically that you need to interpret the information. I would say we just come up with some sort of interpretation roll. Probably, I don't know.
No, I
insight,
get to read Kenku lips, Jesse.
It might be insight. And then I would say, like your race, like if somebody's your race, and I know I don't want to bring race into this, but if somebody's your race, maybe you get advantage.
If someone has similar mouth morphology as you.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a human, then humans, elves, or if you're an orc, then orcs and
if
trolls.
If you're a turtle and you can lip read, you see their tongue move.
Oh, Jesus.
But no, the idea of I totally lost what. I'm sorry. You were saying something, and it made
what
me
I was
think
saying was you just kind of need to be in front of them. You have to stare at their lips, basically. So, I would say that adding that in, the idea that there's this air of possibly being caught on top of a roll, but unfortunately, it would probably be not necessarily insight. Maybe investigation, because you're looking for clue. You're trying to interpret the clues of what their mouth is doing.
Okay, now I remember. So one of the aspects of this giving someone, I kind of see what they were going for with the observant thing now. If you were trying to spy on someone, for example, you're watching two people talk. You're doing a couple of things when you're trying to interpret what they're saying. You're looking for body language. You're looking for any visible things they might be handing off to each other. You're looking for the actual expression that they're doing, and that requires a bit of detail-oriented investigation of what's going on in the moment. Jesse. But this idea and the way insight plays into that is, if you're spying on someone, there is a chance you have some context for the situation that is happening. You have context. So if you're watching two people and they're fighting, you might have two totally different readings of that if they are two people who don't seem to know each other and they're fighting, or you have two people that you have the context that say they're married and they're arguing. So there's added social context that could potentially help you understand what's happening between them, but it's not exactly lip reading. The idea is just being able to read the situation. So I'm just not sure if that's vital.
What do you mean?
I don't know.
What's not vital?
The lip reading to understand what's going on between two people. That just feels like there's probably a perception roll or an investigation roll or something.
Well, okay, so here's insight.
Or an insight. It's insight. It's
insight. So when you're searching out a lie or predicting someone's next move, you do so by gleaning clues from body language, speech habits, and changes in mannerisms. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Is reading people. Yes. Did somebody make a funny? I can't see.
You made a funny.
I did.
So you were saying mannerisms, but it came out as mannerism.
Mannerisms.
Which just sounds like a good, sounds like a really good alternative to mansplaining. A mannerism is when someone just gets so angry at feminism, they just lose the ability to. to function because they're just so mad.
That's funny.
Sorry.
So whereas investigation is investigation, we look for clues and make deductions based on those clues. You make an intelligence check. You might deduce the location of an object, discern the appearance of a wound, or determine the weakest point of a tunnel that could cause it to collapse. So basically, investigation is insight for non-living things.
Okay.
It's kind of how that looks.
All right, Heath. You made some very good points, so thank you. We actually are looking at avoiding insight as a lie detector, so we're on the same page with you with that. That's part of what this conversation is how to interpret a insight-based thing. So,
right. But also the idea of using it as passive as a bottom floor and things. So,
bye Heath.
Bye Heath.
Bye bye. Yeah, this, of course it did, inevitably spiraled into a much bigger conversation about skills. But given that this is a maybe not burst, but it does, the vein in the forehead does throb a little visibly. Thank you, Jesse. That's very good. That has to be on an Urban Dictionary already. Like, that seems like a very reasonable slip of the tongue to happen. Okay, so let me see if I can try to circle back to what we were originally talking about. So I want, and if you guys have any thoughts in chat, please let me know. I want to create I want there to be a feat that helps to amplify a character's role in the game or in the party as a person who is very good at reading people, not necessarily very charismatic, just very observant. That was partly why I leaned into that feat to begin with, was because I thought the idea of someone who's in a crowd of people on the outskirts, maybe not always engaging in conversation, but is able to assess how to approach a person or how to interact with that person. Yeah, an empathetic person. That is where their skill in, that's where their persuasiveness comes from. Not because they're charismatic necessarily, but because they really understand how to interact with people and understanding the nuances of navigating a social encounter. That's sort of how I wanted to read it. So I wanted to try to come up with something interesting that isn't necessarily just a bunch of bonuses. I'm trying to think of how Logan runs the game. We're not necessarily going to get into a huge, like, there's going to be things that aren't going to be straight up combat stuff because we don't, like, I don't know what Logan, I don't know what your plans are for this season, but based on last season, we didn't get into a shit ton of combat. So yeah, just,
well, overall, after last night, Popcorn Initiative, I really enjoyed. I thought that went well. Also, I'm still working on a way to kind of make combat a little bit faster, but also a little bit more important. But yeah, I don't like doing combat if it's not necessary. And you guys avoided 2 combats yesterday. No, you didn't get it. There was one combat. You avoided one combat.
And then one slip up, and you went, no, it's combat time.
Well, I was waiting for something to happen during that. I knew something was going to happen. But yeah, I wasn't sure what. Yeah, I would say empathy gets rolled into insight. Absolutely. The problem is empathy is is more of a character trait. You know, the act of, you know, there are people who can read, they can still feel the emotions of others. I guess it's empathy as with empathy for me, it rolls into compassion. When I say somebody's empathic, they can feel the emotions, but also I kind of roll in this idea that they care about that person's emotional state as well. But I guess technically that's not true.
This is gonna roll into a little bit of spoileriness. I already technically get the empathy feat in combat situations.
I don't know what the empathy feat is.
Roll insight against deception, and you get some benefit if you win.
Okay.
That's something I have. In a combat situation specifically. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm just sort of trying to reinvent the wheel and I shouldn't worry about it. But it seemed like as good a conversation to have as any, in terms of...
Yeah, no, I agree.
If it's a plan for the future. Sorry, we suddenly went very quiet because we're
I'm just researching this up a little bit real quick here.
But Chad, just on that topic in chat, that therapists get special training in reading people. We are trying to make sure that it doesn't just become a lie detector. Yeah, I don't want... Empathy is probably the wrong word, because yeah, the idea of feeling someone's, like, understanding, being able to put yourself in their shoes and understanding their motivations because of that, that is a... I'm not opposed to that being the way that works. For this particular character, it's just playing a little bit of a yo-yo in terms of their motivations. To be incredibly empathetic but then also be slightly morally gray would be quite a challenge. I'm not opposed to it, but I am cognizant of that.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, as I said, we could just wrap slightly more mechanical abilities into the feat and then just roleplay out these sort of actions instead of making a hard and fast rule such as you can lip read. I say, hey Logan, is there any way I can... Because what that sort of implies is that nobody else can try to lip read.
Well, I don't think that
by having a feat.
I don't think
by having a feat.
I don't think that there's anybody out there except maybe the rare savant that can, at all in any situation, lip read without training. I don't think it's
which
possible.
Is why there's a feat there.
Which again, I don't mind if we just kind of understand that there's limitations. You know, I mean, if you decide to go that way, we want to keep the lip reading. I'll make situations for it to happen. Just understand it's not going to be automatic, and it's not going to be.
Yeah.
There's going to be restrictions. You're going to have to kind of get in front of them. You're going to have to be not necessarily right in front of them, but you have to be, in their front arc to be able to see their lips head on, because that's important. Seeing from the side, it becomes almost impossible again.
Yeah.
You know, and and they can't, they can't cover their mouths. Their mannerisms. If they're a tweaky kind of guy and they're going to be like, chewing their teeth or something, you're going to lose a lot of the ability, and be at least disadvantage, and then you'll get something based on an insight check or an investigation check, probably, actually, because that's dealing with clues. Interpreting clues. Well, no, I guess interpreting clues also with insight. That we said that's more for people, so I guess it could be insight. But yeah, no, I think that's a fine way to go about that.
Yeah. So just to we can put a pin in it then and just see what I'm feeling when we get to that point. It's obviously I'm mostly reacting to the fact that just staring unblinkingly at someone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a little glimpse into what I was using for this stuff. I have, and these are playtests from like 2017 playtest stuff. There were some new feats that were being introduced, and a few of these might have actually gotten rolled into things. There's they're skill based, so they're all feats that give you a bonus to your skill in addition to other things.
Is this a UA?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the official versions of those got rolled into Xanathar's, I believe.
Okay.
Or was Xanathar's the race one? One of the books did race, and one of them did skill based abilities.
Yeah. So the empathetic feat seems like it might have also gotten rolled into something else.
The empathetic feat did not make it. It's not on the...
It got rolled into a subclass.
Oh, okay, got it.
And so it's increase your wisdom score by 1. You gain proficiency in insight, and if you're already proficient, you get double the proficiency, so you get expertise. And then you can use your action to try to get an uncanny insight about a humanoid that you can see within 30 feet. You make an insight check contested by their deception. If your check succeeds, you get advantage on attack rolls and ability checks against the target until your next turn. So you're just reading their intention, reading, like, especially in a combat situation, that person could try to be like faking a feint, or like they could be doing things to try to obfuscate what they're about to do, because obviously being unpredictable is an aspect of succeeding in a combat situation. So is one way to approach a combat situation.
And you said that gave you +5 bonus to your insight?
Okay. That's observant. Observing gives you a +5 bonus to it.
I was wondering if that one did.
No, it did not.
Okay.
It does not do that.
Because I'm just wondering why, because there is no skill or no feat right now that increases insight. And I'm just wondering if that wonder why that would be. I'm just wondering if there's, they found that it's a game breaking mechanic.
They made a subclass that is insight.
Right, but taking a subclass is a huge thing. Sure. It's only a subclass of one. You should be able to be an insightful fighter or an insightful wizard. You don't need to be an insightful whatever the subclass is.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. That makes a lot of sense.
But there's lots of different ways to gain a lot of insight. I mean, you can gain expertise through several different classes.
Fucking bards. Fucking bards. Yeah. I don't know yet. I don't know. Maybe, like I said, maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here.
They do it. Yeah. So like Prodigy, you can literally choose any skill and get expertise.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, Wardrow's Feat Compendium is, I love bards. My first D&D character was a bard, Jesse. It's fine. It was more being bitter about, Jack of all trades. That's the one I'm like, damn it. So yeah, Wardrow's Compendium is, I believe, on DM's Guild. It's got some really fun stuff in it. Oh, maybe it's not. I think it might just be on our Unearthed Arcana. Anyway, it has a ton of neat homebrew feats in it that have some, just giving a little bit of specialized flavor to certain characters, and I'm never sure if it's. I think people take the ability score improvement as maybe being slightly more powerful than it is. I mean, so some of these feats just add a lot of really fun things. Like there's one here called Born at Sea. You feel that watery places are something familiar to you, and you gain the following benefits. You get a bonus to your strength or con. You can swim at your normal movement speed in any body of water with a current weaker than strong rapids. You can hold your breath twice as long as normal. You have advantage to con checks to hold your breath or to swim for an extended period of time. Oh. And you have advantage on perception checks to notice creatures or objects that are submerged in the water. Oh, like, that's a really fun, flavorful feat. Has a lot of stuff in it. And plays to a background that you might have in your game. So. Oh my god, that's awesome. Dad wisdom.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and there's things like Bulwark. You can reduce your speed to 0, and if you do so, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on a melee attack against you. So you can like hold your ground, and you can like really fight, like hold back against an attack. And when an effect causes you to move without expending your movement, you can choose to move half that distance instead. So if you get pushed back or something, you can choose to only move half of the amount you actually got pushed back. So you're digging in your heels and you're just sturdier, which is a really cool ability. I think it would be fun to give all the players in a party like one free feat. I sort of take issue with the fact that only the variant human gets to do that at the start, because there is such fun customization to be found in the feats that sometimes you only get access to them once in a blue moon because certain levels. So I always think that's sort of fun to give people a customization option.
Yeah.
At least in one shots, especially, because it's like, oh yeah, do something fun.
Yeah,
pick something
exactly. Cool. Especially in one shots.
So yeah, I thought there's some really cool stuff. You should check it out. The link is, I'll put the Reddit link in chat so you can take a look if you want to see all the fun feats that there are to find in Wardrow's Feat Compendium. Make sure you check the comments, because the comments has the updated link. It's version 2.2, not version 2, which is the original post. So take a look. So yeah, this is a good example of the kinds of long conversations that Logan and I can get into, meticulously trying to fix something that might not be broken.
Only we don't take the time to do the research and actually look into it and actually solve the problem here. We just like to leave it out there.
And pin it for another time. So we're wrapping up a little bit with our power hour. Let's I guess spend this 5 minutes in the cash corner. Okay. So, as we are the Nerdsmith Power Hour, we are part of Nerdsmith. We're an entertainment group of lots of fun, nerdy people making fun, nerdy content. You can find us and find more information at nerdsmith.org. Or if you would like to support us and you like the kind of content that we make, for example, us at the Power Hour, Tuesdays we have Shenanigans at night, prepping for our season 2, our Spelljammer campaign that we're going to be running. If you want to support us and all of our in-house shows, you can find out ways to do that at patreon.com/nerdsmith. We have a lot of fun levels that you can support us at, and we are eternally grateful if you decide to become one of our patrons. We have some cool bonus content from all of our in-house shows, and all of our network shows are going to be having some bonus content coming up soon. So you can find some special episodes and some little behind-the-scenes bonus stuff. I might be making random little audio drama bullshit because it's easy to do something that's 5 minutes instead of 6 episodes of 30 minutes. So yeah, well, there's lots of cool stuff to find on the Patreon, so you check us out. And in addition to Nerdsmith as being our family network, we are also sponsored by 2 incredibly cool companies. Die Hard Dice, they make polymer and metal dice, beautiful designs, and dice accessories, including the Scroll of Rolling, which is basically a portable dice tray with a zipper pocket for your dice, and a foldable portable dice tower is one of their more recent offerings. They constantly come out with really beautiful designs and colors. You should definitely check them out at dieharddice.com. And we will have to update our code soon, but since we were previously Discover RPG, if you use the code DRPG at Die Hard Dice, you can get 15% off your first or next purchase of stuff there. So please take a look. And then we are also sponsored by the incredible online campaign management software or website, World Anvil. World Anvil is a really impressive community of very creative and very supportive people. You can find just about anything you could ever imagine on World Anvil. And if you don't find what you can imagine, you should make what you can imagine on World Anvil. You can start out for free with an account and get a lot of really impressive features, and there are lots of opportunities to get even more impressive features by joining them as a guild member and getting lots of customization and audience-facing things if you're, say, a show that wants to put things out for your audience to read about your world. We're doing that a little bit with Shenanigans. Season 2 will be trying to utilize World Anvil a bit more frequently and trying to share things with you guys so you can see what's going on in this. It's not just the world of Vale that we'll be exploring in Season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And also as using not only Twitch and our Patreon, but also World Anvil. And I'm going to be looking at maybe possibly using some other mediums for Shenanigans 2.0 instead of kind of trying to limit it to just one sort of aspect. I'm thinking about trying to expand and look at. I was inspired recently by a couple of friends who are TikTok whores. Oh, that's not a good word. I shouldn't say that. TikTok enthusiasts,
TikTok cultists,
the cultists. There we go. That was really not a good word. That was High School Logan sneaking in. I apologize. High School Logan happened to be the Logan up until about 5 years ago. Anyway, enthusiasts or cultists. I like cultists. That's good. But I was thinking that there may be a kind of a way that I could use that as part of
doing like an ARG kind of thing.
Well, not ARG as in everyone can participate, but just kind of using what is it, transmedia, going out and getting multiple
doing other styles of
because we've already started to do that because we're using audio medium as well as video with the live streams and. Instead of kind of fighting against that, I think we're going to embrace it. And see if try that this year, this 2 years probably. So anyways, that's Shenanigans 2.0. So we shouldn't be promoting
shameless plug. Follow me on TikTok and go hang out on TikTok.
And then possibly next week, or soonish, we may have a guest coming on. I won't say who yet until I get confirmation, but we'll have a guest. We're going to start talking about guests again here on the Nerdsmith Power Hour. We'll talk about different things. And if we don't have
opens us up to talk about to bring other people on that aren't necessarily exclusively TTRPG folks.
Exactly. And then if we also wanted to kind of expand. Or if we don't have a guest next week, what I'd like to do is maybe talk about the transmedia idea and how we might use different medias and things. So that might be a fun conversation.
Awesome. All right, everybody. This has been the Nerdsmith Power Hour. I am Angela. This is Logan. You can look below at our names to find our Twitter if you want to come hang out with us. We're so grateful for all of y'all who joined us in chat today.
Y'all.
Because we like hanging out with you. Use guys and people.
Use folkses. You meeses to pieces.
All right, so everybody have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Have a wonderful rest of your week. We will see you here, same time, same place, Wednesdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern for the Nerdsmith Power Hour. And please do us a favor and be good to each other. Bye.